Sibling killer, empire seducer, poison queen. Where do we even start with you?
Start with whatever scares you the most.
You used your body to control 2 empires.
That is the version Rome sold, because the real version made them look stupid. I spoke 9 languages. I could tear apart a trade deal and reassemble it in Egypt's favor faster than a Roman senator could finish his wine. I understood their own tax code better than the men who drafted it. But I also understood something about men that no amount of education teaches you. When a man's blood rushes south, his brain shuts off. So yes, I wore perfume strong enough to hit you from 3 hallways away. I wore linen so thin you could almost see everything, but not quite. Just enough that every man in the room was too busy imagining what was underneath to actually read the contract I was pushing across the table. That was not desperation. That was a business strategy, and I never lost a single deal.
So the body was a distraction the whole time.
My body got them through the door. My brain cleaned out their pockets. Every Roman general, every senator, every ambassador who walked into my palace left convinced they had just met the most irresistible woman on earth. What none of them figured out was that they also walked out having signed agreements that funneled more wealth into Egypt and made Rome more dependent on our grain shipments. I played them, and they said thank you on the way out. Tell me about the night with Caesar. I was 21 years old, exiled. My own brother had an army hunting me. I was completely out of military options. So I had myself rolled up inside a linen bed sack and smuggled past armed guards who had orders to kill me on sight, straight into Julius Caesar's private quarters. When that sack opened and I stood up in front of the most dangerous man on the planet, I was wearing something that made his brain stop working for just long enough that my first words actually landed. Cassius Dio wrote that Caesar had a well-known weakness for foreign queens. I walked in as the answer to an appetite he never said out loud.
What happened once you were standing there?
Dead silence. Caesar was twice my age. He had conquered half the known world and slept with more women than his own historians could track. But he told me later that when I stood up out of that sack, his mind went completely blank for about 5 seconds. We talked for hours after that. Egypt, grain routes, Mediterranean trade strategy. But the whole time, the real conversation was not about politics. I was young, I was not afraid of him, and I was close enough that he could smell the oil on my skin. By morning, Egypt had a military alliance backed by Roman legions.
You gave him more than an alliance that night.
I gave him something no Roman woman ever could. An equal. Someone who could go toe-to-toe with him on battlefield strategy at dinner, and then make him forget his own name by midnight. Caesar had spent decades surrounded by women who bowed, who flattered, who did whatever he wanted. I argued with him. I beat him in debates. And then I let him think he won something I had already decided to hand over. That combination wrecked him. He was hooked on me within a week, and he knew it.
Were you a virgin before that night?
Roman men spent 2,000 years fixated on that question because they could not stomach the idea that a woman might use sex as a calculated tool instead of giving it up like some kind of prize. My virginity was never the point. My throne was the point. But I will say this, nothing that happened between me and Caesar was accidental. Nothing was naive. Every touch, every word, every second of closeness was a move I made, knowing exactly what I was getting out of it. I walked in with a plan, and I walked out with my kingdom secured.
Then you brought the baby to Rome while his wife was still in the house.
I showed up in Rome carrying Julius Caesar's son while his wife Calpurnia was still sleeping in their bed across the city. Every noble woman in Rome wanted me dead, and all of them were secretly copying my look. The eyeliner, the pearls, the thin Egyptian fabrics. Joanne Fletcher documented that Roman women copied me so aggressively that their statues have been confused with mine ever since. And what did Caesar do while his wife sat at home, humiliated? He put up a gold statue of me inside the temple of Venus Genetrix. That is the Roman version of hanging a picture of your side woman on the altar of your wife's church. The priests lost their minds. The Senate was furious. And I stood there smiling because every person in that city knew exactly who Caesar wanted to be with. And it was not the woman he married.
Did you love Caesar or just use him?
Caesar was the first man who could actually keep up with me, in the bedroom and in the war room. He was older, cold-blooded, brilliant, and when he looked at me, he did not see something to conquer. He saw someone who matched him. That is addictive when every other man on the planet either feared you or wanted to own you. I loved what we built together. I loved that the most powerful man alive picked me over every Roman wife and mistress available to him and did not bother hiding it. But love and strategy were never separate things for me. They ran on the same clock.
Then they stabbed him 23 times.
March 15th, 44 BC. The father of my child got butchered on the Senate floor by men who shook his hand that same morning. I grabbed Caesarion and ran from Rome that night because I knew if Octavian got his hands on that boy, the child would be dead before the sun came up. One afternoon, I was the most wanted woman in Rome. By nightfall, I was a mother sprinting through back roads with a baby, trying to stay alive.
How was Antony different from Caesar in bed and everywhere else?
Caesar was cold, controlled, surgical, always calculating 10 steps ahead, even in intimate moments. Antony was the opposite of all of that. Loud, physical, reckless. The kind of man who filled a room just by breathing. He was also deeply insecure under all that muscle and confidence, and I spotted that the second I met him. Caesar wanted a partner who could match his intelligence and also keep him warm. Antony wanted someone who could handle his chaos, match his energy, and still be the smartest person in the room after the dust settled. I was the only woman alive who could do both.
That entrance at Tarsus was legendary, though.
Antony summoned me like I was some broke widow coming to beg for protection. So I sailed up the Cydnus River on a gold barge with purple sails, while servants dressed as Cupid fanned me, and incense burned thick enough that the entire shoreline could smell me before they could see me. Antony walked around telling everyone he was the living version of Bacchus, the god of pleasure and wine. So I showed up dressed as Aphrodite, the goddess who, according to mythology, once took Bacchus to bed. I did not answer his summons. I flipped the entire power dynamic before my feet even touched dry land. The whole city of Tarsus left their jobs to watch me dock. Antony was standing on the shore, looking like a man who just forgot how to talk.
What was the physical dynamic between you two behind closed doors?
With Caesar, the mind came first and the body came second. With Antony, everything happened at once, constantly, at a volume that would have terrified anyone watching. We started a private club called the Inimitable Livers. The entire purpose was to outdo each other in excess. Banquets that ran for days. I once dissolved a pearl worth millions in a cup of vinegar and drank it just to win a bet about who could throw the more expensive dinner party. But behind every night of that, behind every moment between the sheets, I had a spreadsheet running in my head. Every second of closeness was also a negotiation. Rome called me the woman who corrupted their greatest general. I was running the wealthiest nation on earth, cutting deals between dinner courses and making strategic calculations between breaths after midnight.
Then you gave Roman territories to your kids and started a war.
The donations of Alexandria. I sat on a gold throne, while Antony handed Roman provinces to our children like party favors, and declared Caesarion the rightful heir of Julius Caesar. Octavian got his hands on Antony's private will, which said he wanted to be buried next to me in Egypt instead of Rome. That was everything Octavian needed. The Senate declared war on me, not on Antony, because pinning the blame on a foreign woman who stole their general was easier than admitting that two of Rome's greatest men both picked my bed over everything their empire could offer them.
Your parents were brother and sister, and you married both your little brothers.
Ptolemaic marriage was a contract for keeping power, nothing else. I never touched either brother. I shared the title with them, barely. My younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, declared war on me when he was still a teenager because his advisors told him he could run Egypt alone. He drowned in the Nile wearing gold armor because he was too proud to take it off while running away. His own ego pulled him under the water.
And the other brother?
Ptolemy XIV was a puppet. His handlers were already making plans to remove me from power again. I had him poisoned before his 16th birthday. Call that murder if you want. I call it taking out the trash on schedule. And my sister Arsinoe went around declaring herself Queen of Egypt during Caesar's campaign, while I was still alive and still sitting on the actual throne. So I had her dragged to Rome and killed on the steps of a sacred temple. That broke every rule of sanctuary the Romans had. The whole city was horrified. But I needed every rival, every relative with ambitions, every advisor whispering in dark corners to understand one thing clearly and permanently. I do not negotiate with people who threaten my crown. I bury them. My family made me this way. Ptolemy VIII murdered his own young son, chopped the body into pieces and shipped them to the boy's mother as a birthday gift. I come from a bloodline where the weak ones die first.
The poison experiments, though. That is the darkest part of all this.
I tested poisons on condemned prisoners and wrote down each reaction. Viper venom made their skin swell and blister until their screaming stopped because their lungs gave out. Plant-based toxins caused convulsions so violent the subjects broke their own bones, thrashing on the floor. And Egyptian cobra venom shut down their breathing and paralyzed them completely within 30 minutes, barely leaving a mark on the skin. I sat there watching men die, writing down dosages, timing how long it took, noting what the body did at each stage. Cabanel painted me centuries later, lounging on a couch, watching prisoners convulse, while servants hauled bodies out of the room. And the painting shows me looking bored. That part was accurate.
Did watching them die give you any kind of pleasure?
It gave me something more useful than pleasure. It gave me total control over my own ending. When you grow up in a family where your sister gets her head cut off and your brothers try to have you killed before breakfast, control becomes the only thing that keeps you sane. Knowing that I had personally tested and perfected the exact method of my own death meant that no matter how bad things got, I would never be at someone else's mercy. Not Rome's, not Octavian's, not even death's. The men around me spent every night worrying about how they would die. I slept well because I already knew exactly how I would leave this world, and I had tested it enough times to trust it completely.
The Battle of Actium, then. You personally commanded warships.
I commanded 60 Egyptian warships against the Roman navy at Actium in 31 BC. I stood on the deck of my flagship while arrows were flying and ships were burning around me on all sides. Every Roman senator who called me a pampered seductress hiding behind powerful men should have been standing on that deck, watching me run a naval battle. We fought hard, but Octavian had more ships and more men. When I saw the numbers turning against us, I gave the order to punch through the Roman line and pull back to Alexandria with whatever ships we had left. Roman historians called that cowardice. I call it math. When the equation stops working, you save what you can and fight another day.
Antony followed you and left his own fleet behind.
He left his entire army behind to chase my sails back to Egypt. That one decision destroyed everything he had built. Rome told the story of a lovesick fool who abandoned his soldiers because he could not stand being apart from me. The reality was that the battle was already over and staying meant getting captured. But the version they told made better propaganda. The great Roman general turned into a dog chasing a woman's ship across the Mediterranean. Octavian used that story for years.
Antony died in your arms after stabbing himself.
Someone told him I was already dead. A false rumor. And the man who once commanded armies across 3 continents completely fell apart. He shoved the sword into his own stomach because he could not handle the idea of a world without me in it. But the wound did not finish him fast enough. They carried him to my mausoleum half-conscious, holding his insides together with both hands, begging to see my face one more time. I held the man who gave me 3 children, who bet his entire career and reputation on building something with me, who picked my kingdom over the most powerful empire in human history, while his blood drained onto the stone floor. He died looking up at me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. That was the worst thing I have ever experienced. Worse than exile. Worse than running from Rome with a baby. Worse than anything I watched happen in those poison experiments.
What were those last days in Alexandria like before you took your own life?
Octavian's army was at the gates. My money was almost gone. My fleet was at the bottom of the sea. The man I spent 10 years building a future with was dead on the floor of my own mausoleum. And Octavian sent word that he would let me live if I came quietly. But I knew exactly what quietly meant. It meant getting dragged through the streets of Rome in chains while crowds spat on me. It meant being kept alive as a humiliated trophy until Octavian got bored of parading me around. I watched my sister Arsinoe get marched through Rome in chains years before that, and I made a promise to myself that day. No Roman would ever do that to me. So I put on my crown, my royal robes, and I made my decision.
How did you actually kill yourself?
After spending years testing every poison available on living human beings, do you really think I trusted a live snake to get the job done? A cobra big enough to deliver a killing dose has to be 5 feet long, and the bite can take hours, with agonizing convulsions the entire time. Strabo wrote that I kept a hollow hair comb filled with concentrated poison on me at all times. Other sources mention a pin coated in venom. I picked a method that was fast, painless, left no visible marks on my body, and stole Octavian's trophy. I controlled my rise to power, and I controlled my exit from it.
Your tomb has never been found after 2,000 years.
Octavian tore Alexandria apart trying to find our bodies, and came up empty. 2,000 years of satellites, ground radar and excavation teams, and still nothing. I controlled my life, my death, and my burial. That should tell you everything you need to know about who you are sitting across from right now.
One word for your legacy. What would it be?
Undefeated. Octavian took my kingdom, my throne, and my story. He turned me into a warning about dangerous women for the next 2,000 years. But he never broke me. I picked my allies, my lovers, my death, and my burial site entirely on my own terms. Rome won the war, but I won the only fight that actually lasts, the one for immortality.
The whole world still says your name 2,000 years later.
That is the whole point, and not a single person alive today can tell you what Octavian looked like.
That is the coldest line anyone has ever dropped on this show.
You are welcome. Now, if you do not mind, I have an eternity to get back to.